Okay. Is this not working properly? It always says my audio stuff is not working. Let's check. Okay. Testing. Okay. Audio should be working. Let's go. All right. Hi, everybody. Morning. Hopefully people can hear me.
We can hear you, sir.
Awesome, thanks. So we'll just wait. There's still people arriving. So we'll just wait a little longer. I don't expect, well, I don't know. We might finish a little early. We're not going to cover the whole chapter today, but it's really quite a short chapter, and I think we can get most of the way through it. But we'll see. I think all of you are probably chomping at the bit to go and finish your reading responses too. So, you know, if we finish a little early, that's fine. I have a dog here. Usually she's excited to be in class, but not today. Hey, hey, no. What's this? You want to say hi? Oh, yeah. Now you want to go hang out with Sarah? Yeah. Oh. All right, let's get ready. Share the old screen. Ah, okay, go on, you. Ow. Oh, well, go on. Go on. All right. Right, I guess everybody's here who's going to be here. So we may as well get started. My slow computer will, oh, there we go. Okay, so yeah, we want to start chapter 2 today. What is technology? Defining or characterizing technology. But before we do that, yeah, I'm getting the odd question about the reading response, but I suspect the questions are coming from students who are not tuning into the live lectures. So I guess this is for whoever might be watching this later once it's recorded, is, you know, before you ask me anything, make sure that I haven't already answered your question, because I'm getting a lot of questions regarding things that I've already answered. But if you're here right now, you probably aren't the one asking me that. Probably it's somebody who's not able to watch the live lectures or join in on the live lectures. So hopefully whoever has questions will watch this and all the other lectures and not have questions anymore. But if you've done that and you still have questions, then I will answer them now. So, oh yeah, my dog, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, she's pretty cool. So yeah, this is not to say like, oh, you guys asking me questions, or no, don't worry about that. You know, it's okay to double check. I actually, that's another maybe a nice thing I can say about the students who are here and who are asking me questions, is that the people who are really on top of the details like that tend to do pretty well. So you know, I've noticed that in my other classes. Students ask me some students who ask me lots of questions, of course, are consistently in the A range. And I think it's just that sort of meticulousness that gets them there. And that's a good thing. So, but that said, I would like to know if there are any other questions that I can take care of now. Maybe something that I haven't covered, or anything like that. So there's some questions here in the chat. So yeah, for file names and stuff, yeah, I recommend going with the I recommend going with just what's in the template. And you can just kind of swap stuff out, make it your own. Double check the word count. Yeah, Vicente, I think you could do 850, but I wouldn't go any longer than that. You know, an extra 50 to 100 words is probably fine, but any longer than that, and then, you know, it starts to take time away from grading other material and other assignments, right? So I would try and keep it within 500 to 750 words, but if you do go over by 50 to 100 words, that's all right. The main thing is not to go under. Like, don't go under 500 words. That's not enough discussion, you know. Oh yeah, you can reference the textbooks. There are ways to cite things where, you know, maybe say somebody, for example, is quoted in the textbook, and you want to cite that quote. Well, you can say, you can just quote it and say, you know, oh, this is you know, I don't know, this is Jones 1950 quoted in Dusek 2006 page whatever, right? And there are ways to do that. The little particular way you do it depends on what citation style that you choose, but yeah, you can absolutely do that. It kind of saves you from having to hunt down the original source. You know, you can just say, you know, this is this source quoted in this source, and you do that in your parenthetical referencing, and you need to do it in the references page too. But yeah, you can absolutely do that. Let's see. A couple more people showing up here. So if there are no other questions about the reading response, we can get started. We can talk about what technology is. What is technology? This is not in the textbook, what I'm about to say, but well, it's for what I'm saying word for word isn't in the textbook, but it's there if you look. The way we understand technology today, I mean, first of all, technology, the root of that word, what is the root of technology? I wonder if we have any etymology fans in the room who can tell us where the word technology even comes from. Let's open up the chat, or people can raise their hand. Techno music, yeah. Okay, so there's a couple good answers. So Max, ology implies a study of, yeah, that's right, from the ancient Greek logos, which means, well, actually logos can mean a lot of things. It can mean reason, it can mean true speech, language, logic. It's the root of logic, it's the root of our study. It's what the Greeks used, logos. We have logos, intelligence and language. And we can stand apart from the world, from the cosmos, and make sense of it using our logos. And that's why ology is, you know, denotes a science today. Biology, blah, 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 something like that. Technology. It's interesting that we use it for technology. right? The Greeks would have called what we call technology now techne, right? Technocracy, this is more, we're going to encounter this in future chapters, but this word I think is all about ruling with technology or ruling technology. I haven't got to the chapter yet, but I suspect we're going to maybe see a little of both. We'll see. So yeah, like Max says in his previous comment and here, yeah, it's like a study. And techne as a type of knowledge. Techne is like craft, right? Like tools, like artisans, you know, that's techne. It's not quite the same as art. I think the Greeks would have understood the creation of art in terms of what they call poesis, which is the root of our word for, you know, poetry, which means a sort of bringing forth into being. But techne is like skills and tools, practical know-how, right? Like Vicente says here, yeah, like know-how, basically, yeah. So technology, I think the etymology of the word kind of betrays this, is that even today we think of technology as like tools, machinery, applied science. You know, we're very used to thinking of technology this way. Yeah, like Stefan, Jonah, yeah, you're right, crafting, like if you were the guy in Athens who made the lyre. You know, a lyre is a harp-like instrument that was played in ancient Greece. If you were the guy who built the lyre, well, that's techne. If you're the guy who plays the lyre and writes songs on it, that's artistry. You know, that's musike, that's poesis, right? So, and I should say, like, I am no expert on ancient Greek, so you know, I don't want to go too far into the meaning of these words and all this old-timey classical Greek terminology, but just to make you aware of the differences, how the ancients sort of thought of this, and how, you know, this is kind of carried on into contemporary discussion. So yeah, if you're like a craftsman or something, that's techne. You know, think of the Renaissance man before. We talked about this this idea of science as the marriage between sort of like craftsmanship, practical stuff, and scholarship and theory. And this started to happen in the Renaissance thanks to the breakdown of class divisions. Something similar almost happened in ancient Greece. The pre-Socratic philosophers, and even philosophers after Socrates, natural philosophers, that is, not Plato and Aristotle. Although, yeah, Aristotle, I think you can consider an ancient scientist. But, I mean, geez, the ancient Greeks really made some great strides in science, or what we would now call science. They were advanced, very advanced. There were some things that didn't happen, that didn't quite, you know, result in a sort of full-blown scientific revolution like we saw in Europe during the Renaissance, during the Enlightenment. Nonetheless, something similar was going on there. You had theoreticians marrying practical know-how to try and figure out how the world worked, you know, logos, standing apart from the world and using logos to understand the ordered whole of creation, the cosmos. So anyway, that's technology, or is it? Right? Last time we learned that, well, as we were discussing the history and philosophy of science, that, you know, it's not a straightforward thing to try and characterize science. We covered a lot of different ways of understanding it. For example, that we started with inductivism, you know, Francis Bacon, where science is observing the world and reasoning from individual cases, reasoning generally from individual cases, trying to build laws that describe the world and how it works. Then verificationism and the logical empiricism, which grew out of the Vienna Circle and the logical positivists, where statements have to be verified. Statements should have a positive truth value. They need to match the world. We need to be able to check if they're true, right? Falsificationism, Karl Popper, right? Well, science isn't about verification. At the most powerful, the most scientific level, which is the level of the theory, what scientists are really trying to do is falsify things, not verify. They're trying to falsify. Yes, we verify individual statements. That's true. We do that. But we try and disprove the laws that we've built up. And, if we disprove enough laws, or as Kuhn says, if we encounter enough anomalies, then maybe we'll have a paradigm shift or something, right? And yeah, of course, we talked about Kuhn's approach, which discusses science and science from sort of historical and philosophical perspective. And his work really opened the way for a lot of different scholarship on science as a human activity. The sociology of scientific knowledge, feminism, postmodernism, non-Western ways of looking at the world and non-Western ways of doing science, like ancient science, even the ancient Greeks, like I just said, ancient Indian, ancient Chinese, the Mayans, for goodness sake, had an incredibly complex calendrical system. These are also pretty scientific in their own right, even though they differ from Western science. So it's difficult to characterize science. Can we characterize technology? We're going to run into probably some similar difficulties while trying to do this, because we have this idea of technology as tools or applied science or machinery. But as we'll see today, there are limits to how we can actually apply that understanding of technology. So we want to define technology. What kind of definition could we use? Well, there are many, and we'll take a look at them in a moment. Definitions are important for what we're doing because, as Dusek states as he's starting off the chapter, a lot of disagreements in philosophy kind of stem from there being different definitions being used, and we're not aware that we're each using a different definition. Like, what's an example? What's an example of a debate or something that is a result of simply not having an agreed upon definition of something? Maybe we can think of an example. Max, go ahead.
An example comes off the top of my head when I walk past Parliament in the summer, and the debate between the definition of what is a human life. Does it start at conception? Does it start at a certain point? The law has a very clear answer as to what the human life is at a certain point, especially in Canada. And that's probably not going to change, but that's a debate. Maybe a little bit of a uphill battle for the other side, but a debate nonetheless.
Yeah. So yeah. And I'm not suggesting that any debate between, say, pro-choice or pro-life people could be settled just if they had the same definitions, right? I mean, they do define life differently. I would say some pro-life people would say human life does begin at conception, whereas pro-choice people may or may not grant that, but would place the bodily autonomy of the mother over that of the fetus, right? And this isn't just, this actually, there's reasons why each side defines things this way, right? But this is not really an example of just two parties this is an example of why definitions are important. But there are other examples we might find where the disagreement stems from two parties not realizing that they're talking about two different things, right? I guess one example, you could probably choose an example to do with theology if you really wanted to, because so much in theology depends on definitions, right? Like maybe if you were having a debate with somebody over the existence of God, right? Whether you think God exists depends on how you define that term, right? Do you mean a big guy with a beard sitting up in the heavens, or do you mean all of the universe as a whole? Like, what do you mean, right? Are you like a theist, a pantheist, a deist? So this could be a source of debate if you're defining it this way or that way. And the two interlocutors are kind of carrying on without realizing that they're using their terms and concepts differently, right? But Max, your earlier point, I think, is more illustrative of the second one, right? Another is how one defines something tells you something about their philosophical outlook. This is what I think your example really highlights here. So that's a good example. So we want to define technology. What kind of definition could we use now that we know why they're important? They're important because we need to be able to talk productively about this. And in the course of going over these definitions, we all might come to realize something about our own views of technology. So if anyone wants to jump in at any time and be like, oh yeah, this is how I think of technology, just go ahead, raise your hand or say so in the chat. But one kind of definition, a very old sort of definition, is a real definition. This is the sort of definition that, excuse me. This is the sort of definition that you're going to hear about if you're reading like a Platonic dialogue and you've got Socrates talking about justice or the good or something, right? That's a real definition. Plato as well, obviously. Indeed, the Socrates we encounter is we don't know how much of what we read is actually what Socrates would have believed, right? Because Socrates never wrote anything down. Most of what we know we get from Plato, Xenophon, Aristophanes, thinkers like that. And Plato, at least, presents Socrates as a kind of what we would call today a Platonic realist. But that's a confusing term for reasons that I might come back to in a moment. So what does this view say? Well, according to Dusek, this view assumes that there is a real structure to the world that corresponds to our words and that a correct definition will match the real nature of things, right? And so you probably have a sense of what I'm talking about if you have a background in philosophy. What are you doing there, dog? Sorry, my pupper is sneaking around here. Tula, come here. Go see her, Sarah. Go on. Don't want her to get up to any trouble here. Okay. Slides are moving. Okay. So if you've encountered, any Plato or Socrates, philosophy people, you're going to know about the forms. Oh, sorry, Dula. Yeah, my dog's name is similar to yours. Yeah, hers begins with a T, and she gets she sneaks around and does things she's not supposed to when I'm not paying attention. So sorry for the confusion. So a real definition, like if you're into philosophy, if you have this kind of a background, you know about the forms or ideas, right? Plato kind of uses Socrates as his mouthpiece for what we call Platonic realism, which means that the forms, the perfect forms or ideas from Idane, what is seen in the mind by the intellect, nous, what is grasped by the intellect, those are what are really real, fundamentally real, right? So there are all kinds of forms. I mean, I know this is a philosophy class, so stop me if I'm telling you something you already know. Maybe it'll be easier just to ask, like, who doesn't know about the theory of forms?
Me.
Okay, a few people. Okay, so Leela, Dula, Amin, Stefan. Oh, okay, Jessica. A lot of people actually aren't sure. Okay, let's talk about the forms. Need a refresher? All right. Yeah, why not? Let's do some ancient philosophy real quick. So, if you want to get a really cool idea about this stuff, there's a number of sections from Plato's Republic that you can read. The Allegory of the Cave is probably my favorite. The Divided Line is also very good. But basically, other dialogues too. The Meno is probably a really good one. All of these you can find for free on the internet, by the way. They've long since passed into the public domain. So Plato's theory of forms holds that there exist real forms for everything. Forms for example, cups, right? This is just one cup, right? But it gets its cupness from the perfect form of a cup. This is like a mere shadow or a mere appearance of a cup. The form of the cup would be like a perfect cup. And all other cups have their cupness in virtue of participating in this form, right? And there aren't just forms or ideas for physical objects. There are forms for everything, right? Forms for justice or the good or virtue or anything you can think of. Plato thinks there is a perfect form for that thing. And these are the things in themselves. These are the things that really exist, or the noumena, as we would say, if we wanted to use the ancient Greek terminology. Yeah, David, absolutely right. This ties in with Plato's math and the geometry example. Yeah, the geometry exercise in the Meno. Yeah, exactly. Plato actually kind of gets this idea from Pythagoras, right? Pythagoras, the ancient mathematician, who was all about geometry. And Pythagoras thought that what was fundamentally real were things like numbers, harmony, mathematical relationships. Like, that's what was fundamentally real for Pythagoras and his cult. It was a cult, by the way. They were very strange. They didn't eat beans, I believe, because Pythagoras himself died after eating some beans. I guess they were bad, so they didn't eat beans after that. They had to keep certain mathematical secrets to themselves. They didn't tell anyone, for example, that the square root of 2, I believe, is an irrational number. Can't tell anybody that. Society will break down if people know, right? So, but Plato is influenced by Pythagoras. In fact, in Plato's school, the Academy, it was written above the door, not one person untutored in geometry may enter here. So you had to know geometry to do philosophy. And the reason was that Plato's doing his geometry. He's drawing all these shapes in the sand, and he realizes, like, okay, this is just one imperfect triangle. Here's another one. Here's another one. But there must be a perfect triangle with perfectly straight lines, perfect angles, the form of the triangle, right? So he kind of is inspired by Pythagoras's approach. And this is kind of what you get in the allegory of the cave, right? We're bound and fettered in the cave, staring at shadows on the wall that we mistake for reality. Those are mere appearances, mere phenomena. And the things in themselves are not the way they appear. But the things that, the phenomena are the way they are by virtue of their sort of participation in the perfect forms, right? So that's very briefly the theory of forms, and that's a real definition. This is called Platonic realism. Confusingly, though, it's also called Platonic idealism. Realism and idealism are kind of the opposite of one another most of the time, but Plato's an idealist in the sense that the ideas are what are real. the most real thing is the form that can be grasped by the intellect, right? Those are what are fundamentally real. Those are the things in themselves. And for the same reasons, he's also called a realist. So yeah, that's a bit confusing. But just be aware of that. If you see somebody saying a Platonic idealism or Platonic realism, they're kind of the same thing. Aristotle also similarly claimed. Aristotle doesn't think form is primary. Aristotle thinks form and matter are what are really important. Together with their efficient cause and their final cause, this is all related to some complex metaphysical stuff, entelechy and hylomorphism, which I'm not going to get into here. Basically implies to Aristotle that objects have essences and we can understand them. There's a sort of essential whatness to everything that depends on what it's made of, what form it takes, how it was brought into being, and what it is for, right? And if we want to understand the essence of a being, of an entity, we need to understand it in terms of those four causes. I'm not going to get into that too much today. If you're curious, just check out some of my Aristotle lectures on my YouTube channel for my Minds and Machines class. I talk about Aristotle's theory of causality quite a lot there. It's not as straightforward as Plato, so I don't want to get into it. But whether you're a Platonic realist or whether you're more of an Aristotelian, real definitions are supposed to, cut nature at the joints, as it were. They're supposed to correspond to natural kinds, right? Natural kinds of things. Categories of entities that really exist, that would be different entities, different kinds of entities, even if there were no mind to divide things up into, birds versus trees versus cats versus musical instruments, right? Well, a musical instrument is artificial, but you know what I mean? Like, natural kinds are supposed to be, categories of things that really exist. Rocks, trees, fish, birds, A lot of natural scientists, natural philosophers from back in the day, as well as natural scientists today, actually think of their definitions like this, right? Electrons are a kind of thing that actually exist, according to many physicists, right? Things are a bit different. I guess things can get a little murky in biology because, you've got like Darwin, you got evolution, where, it looks like from our limited temporal perspective, it looks like there are natural kinds. But if you could speed time up really, really fast, and see how everything actually evolving over time, well, it would be harder maybe to distinguish between, one kind and another. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that a lot of scientists think of their definitions as natural kinds, and philosophers too. Philosophers of technology like Ellul and Heidegger also looked for a sort of essence of technology. They wanted to understand the essential nature of technology. And both of them came to some very interesting, if not difficult to understand, conceptions of the essence of technology. All right, so let's see what we've got next. Where's my, can't seem to change my slides. Come on. There we go. There's also stipulative definitions. Oh my goodness, I've gone way too far ahead. So yeah, stipulative definitions. What are those? Well, Dusek writes, it is claimed that definitions are arbitrary choices or stipulations. Definitions are about words and not things. Opponents of the notion of real definitions deny that there are natural classes or real natures of things to be captured by definitions. And this is influenced by a view called nominalism, which you can read more about in box 2.1. Nominalism, I think, owes a lot to William of Ockham, who's also famous for Occam's razor. The nominalists believed that universals did not exist. These were merely names. What's a universal? Well, you have to go back to Aristotle. Aristotle understood that there were particulars and universals, right? There's a universal cup, like a category of things that are cups, a type of thing, a kind of entity, not a form like Plato believed, but just sort of like a category. Those are universals. And there are particular examples of that category, like this cup, or perhaps a cup that you might be drinking out of right now, right? So Aristotle thought, okay, there are real categories of things and we can talk about them. The nominalists said, no, there's just names. There's just names. And the names are arbitrary, right? So definitions are arbitrary. Probably have encountered before, probably if you've done any math or physics or logic, right? Stipulative definitions are kind of like the axioms in a formal system, right? So if you're doing math, I don't know, let X represent pi or something, right? That's a very simple example of a stipulative definition. Or if you think of, like, if you've read a philosophy treatise, like something that's really systematic and logical, like Spinoza's stuff is like this. Wittgenstein, right? The Tractatus. The world is everything that is the case. The world is a world of facts, not of things. These are stipulative definitions, okay? Yeah. Well, yeah, you could say, if you say that, yeah, we're going to stipulate that X and Y are going to have these functions in our procedure, right? And then you're going to do some math. Maybe you'll solve a problem. Maybe you'll offer a proof, but you need to stipulate something first, right? Like I said, these are like the assumptions or axioms that occur in logic. So, I could just say, if I wanted to offer some kind of logical proof of something, I have to define what I'm talking about first. So that's what this all is. Oh my goodness, excuse me. Oh, I've got the yawns this morning. Now, stipulative definitions work well for some things. They work well in logic and math, as I was just saying, but it's not clear that they will be successful in other discussions. Like Dusek has this funny example, like, we can't define religion as a coffee pot and expect to have a fruitful discourse on religion. That just doesn't work, right? And even if we stipulate, like, okay, I'm going to stipulate that by technology, I mean the systematic organization of mass human labor, blah, 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 blah. Even if I make a stipulation like that, there's a chance that my everyday definition might sneak back in there without me realizing it, right? So when we use a stipulative definition, we need to be careful that we don't accidentally start using our folk notions of what we're talking about, if that makes sense. So those are stipulative definitions. So let's pause here. Is our definition of technology going to be a real definition? I mean, maybe. Tools, machines, these are things that really exist. But it's not clear that this is enough to really characterize technology. It's like, yeah, sure, there are machines. I can point to a car outside, or an airplane flying overhead, or my cell phone, or even a hammer. Oh, my hammer's over there. But anyway, I can point to any one of these artifacts and, like, look, see, that exists. This is a tool or a machine. That's technology. Boom. But that's not all there is to it. So our definition probably won't be a real definition. It probably won't be a stipulative definition, because that makes things kind of tricky, right? I can stipulate that technology is whatever I want. But my sort of folk notion of technology as, tools, machines, and applied science is maybe going to sneak back in there, and it's going to mess up my discussion. So I have to be careful if I decide to go with a stipulative definition. Or better yet, I can just not go with a stipulative definition. I mean, after all, we're not doing logic here. We're doing philosophy. It's got a question here. Tess. For the sake of noting when we resonate with stuff, as you mentioned, I now want to have a conversation with someone where, yeah, or that coffee pot, you could go either way. And I expect your conversation to be very interesting. Religion is a coffee pot, and coffee pots are a religion. I mean, I don't know. You see what I mean, though, like you have to be careful with stipulative definitions. So it makes for good coffee. Yeah. I mean, coffee might be my religion. I need a lot of it. Actually, no. Well, I used to work at a Tim Hortons. God is caffeinated. And God is omni-caffeinated, I would say. I used to work at a Tim Hortons, put myself partly through undergrad, and then again in grad school. Wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, but I developed quite an appetite for coffee. Oh my goodness. Yeah, see, this is all true. Yeah, facts. But boy, did I ever develop a taste for the coffee, and it's not even good coffee, but I was drinking way too much coffee. And now I've kind of like gone off it. I can have like maybe 1-2 cups a day tops. And I just can't have any more. So I'll probably never reach enlightenment, but that's all right. All right, so now there's another kind of definition we need to consider here, and that is the reportative definition. What's a reportative definition? Well, according to Dusek, this sort of definition is a report of how people ordinarily use words. It doesn't claim to find the true structure of reality, but it also doesn't simply make up an arbitrary definition by fiat, just by declaring, oh, hey, this is technology. Or like by fiat, the coffee example is a great one. Like religion is coffee, God is caffeinated. These are fiats, just arbitrarily saying things, right? That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is trying to look at how people use words. How do they do it? And this is a lot like what dictionaries do. Now, dictionaries do more than this, right? Dictionaries don't just tell you how people use the words. They're not just descriptive, they're also normative. They also give you the rules for using the word properly, how to conjugate verbs correctly, for example, how to use the past, present, future tense of certain terms, right? Dictionaries do that. They do more than that, but reportative definitions are part of what it is to be a dictionary definition. So they can, however, be vague and imprecise. The reason is that ordinary language can itself be vague and imprecise. Yeah, Urban Dictionary is very reportative. That is an excellent point. Ooh, Wikipedia. Ooh, geez. Okay, I got to think about this. So, maybe is there like a wiki dictionary, or like, I guess maybe some, yeah, no. See, yeah, Urban Dictionary, yes, is absolutely reportative, and I use it all the time because I think I must be getting old. But you know, I'm teaching my classes, and or maybe I'm on the internets, and I'm starting to notice that there are terms being used by the youth that I don't understand. Liddy, does that mean it's lit? Yeah. 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 So I feel pretty old, but you know, I got to look it up. I got to use Urban Dictionary. And it's very reportative, you know. So if I want to understand if I want to be hip to your jive, to use the terminology, I got to use the reportative definition. Oh, is it slow? I mean, but then again, it's faster than I am. But with Wikipedia, though, Wikipedia is not just about definitions of words. Maybe, see, I don't know what that means. AC, I don't know what that means. So I just looked that one up. That's the, okay, yeah, that's the opposite of cringe. I realize I'm going through all this and this is actually pretty cringe. So yeah, Wiktionary maybe, if it doesn't tell you how to use the words, but like a Wikipedia article is not just reportative. It contains, you know, substantive real definitions too, right? So all right, so the problem with reportative definitions, according to Dusek, is that there are so many different uses of the term around the term technology. For instance, some educators associate the word technology solely with computers in the classroom, right? While the school building itself, as well as other aids to teaching, as the blackboard, are part of technology in the broadest sense, right? So yeah, I mean, vague and imprecise. That's why our definition of technology will probably not be a reportative definition. Okay, Revenge of the Professor. I might have to look up all the cool terms on Urban Dictionary that the kids are using, but I bet nobody knows how to pronounce this. Let's see. What kind of definition is this?
A precising definition.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. It's actually, I believe this is a Latin term. And in Latin, at least in British English, not sure about American or Canadian, you would actually pronounce this as a praising definition. Yeah. And this is a kind of definition that we use in philosophy quite a lot. We use it in other academic areas too. You may have even seen, you know, if you've kind of dipped your toes into some of the literature, you might see papers that are précis. These are kind of like little summative short descriptions of, say, a longer work, right? What does Dusek say about this? He says this sort of definition retains the core ordinary meaning of the word. It is not stipulative or arbitrary. However, unlike a reportative definition, it does not simply describe how people actually use the word. It attempts to sharpen up the boundaries of application of the word by describing the range of application and cutoff points. So what are some examples? Can we think of any examples? I'm thinking of something like Sorites paradox. You know, when does a pile become a hill, right? If we're trying to sharpen our definitions of piles and hills, then we're trying to offer praising definitions of those things. Here's a big one question for the ages. What about God? Right? Philosophers, theologians talk about God, talk about defining God. I'm an atheist myself, but I think this is a useful example. You know, what are some definitions that we could give for this God? You can say in the chat or simply raise your hand. Oh, weird. Yeah, Julien. Yeah, weird of the way it's pronounced. Yeah. I think it's because it's Latin rather than French, but it looks French on the page. So I don't know. Then again, I don't really speak either of those languages. So yeah. So the pré is still there. It's just we kind of skip this S, so we get pressing. It's weird, and I'm probably rolling my R's weird too. But no, same root as precise. Oh yeah. So I suppose you could say a precising definition if you wanted to. I don't see why there would be a problem with that. Excellent. So yeah, like a precising definition. See, I just did it. Say of God, right? Say you're a theologian and you want to do some theology, and you want to understand God. Well, what is God, right? Maybe you're happy with being a pantheist and thinking of God as nature, like Spinoza, right? God or nature, same thing. Yeah, Spinoza's pretty cool, man. He's just doing metaphysics, grinding his lenses, getting excommunicated for daring to ask the questions about the nature of God. Someone needs to make a shirt out of that. Spinoza said there are infinite modes, but all I get is thought and extension. Someone could make a shirt like that. Maybe I'll make it. Maybe I could have merch. That would be cool. Jonah, we'll do a deal with royalties or something. Okay, so if you're talking about God as nature, well, that's fine for some, like the Spinozists, right? Spinoza's kind of a pantheist, so God is an infinite substance. Nice. And has infinite attributes, and we are kind of like finite modifications of two of those attributes, thought and extension, right? And that's fine if you're a Spinozist. But I mean, I guess, Stefan, yeah. But I mean more like, what is God? Think of how many arguments have been had over what God is, that could maybe just be the result of different definitions of God, right? Pantheism versus deism versus theism. And I think theism would be like Elia says, I hope I'm getting everyone's names right, like an anthropomorphic understanding of which is maybe close to what who said this again? To what Stefan said here, the hierarchy of gods. See, that makes me think of Zeus. Zeus is Zeus is the leader of the Olympians of the pantheon. Odin is another example, but Odin is interesting because Odin is not Odin's not like a hyper masculine war god. He's more of a crazy person. In fact, that's what his name means. If you go back to the Proto-Indo-European, Wodenaz actually means the mad one, whereas Zeus or Deus just means the god, right? Or the father. And it comes from Deus Pater, which is also the root of Jupiter, which means sky father, right? So, but when it comes to anthropomorphic examples like Zeus, Odin, Thor, Jupiter, you know, all your favorite examples from mythology are anthropomorphic understandings of God. And even, dare I say, I would say this becomes apparent in the Renaissance. Even Christians started to understand their own God in this way. When you see God being depicted in paintings, for example, in the creation of Adam, it's just Zeus or Jupiter, right? It's just an old guy with a beard, right? So anyway, you can see how many arguments in the history of theology must have resulted just from not having a very precise definition of God. So, you know, without getting sucked down a theological rabbit hole, and returning to technology, you know, technology, according to Dusek, any way that we define or characterize it will probably end up being a precising or praising definition. So that said, I want to say a little bit more about this idea of essence. You know, this idea that by defining technology, we're actually learning something about the essential nature of technology. That might not be what we're doing. Just a sort of word of caution, right? You know, this essential nature is something that I guess goes back to Aristotle and Plato, and of course, both of them had a big influence on subsequent scholarship. Plato, especially the Neoplatonist school, influenced early Christianity, early Christian theology a lot, and Aristotle's metaphysics played a big role in scholastic philosophy in the Middle Ages in Europe. And both of them also had quite a lot of influence in the home of Islam as well, in Dar al-Islam. When Europe was stuck in the Dark Ages, in the Islamic world, they were having a full-blown golden age, where they were preserving and expanding upon the work of a lot of these folks. So the idea of essences came from there. But you know, kind of as we get closer to the present time, we start to see more and more people denying their existence, right? The British empiricists denied the existence of essences. They did not think that essences existed as real natures of things. The notion still persisted, though, until probably the 20th century, when we had, I'd say most philosophers position that entities, I'm thinking somebody here like Ludwig Wittgenstein, right? Point. You know, if you're in the Anglo-American or analytic tradition, you're talking about necessity and sufficiency. If you're in the continental tradition, you're probably still talking about essence at this point, I think. That's what Heidegger does. That's what Ellul does. But if you're in the Anglo-American side of things, you're probably talking about necessity and sufficiency, right? And this is the sort of classical view of concepts. How do we define a concept or an idea of something? Does anybody know? Before I tell you, maybe somebody can volunteer the information. Necessity and sufficiency. Also, no problem. No problem if nobody knows. I will tell you. So, necessity first. Something is necessary. It's necessary. Something is necessary if a thing cannot be, you know, what it is without that thing, right? So being a fruit is a necessary condition for being an apple, right? You can't be an apple if you're a vegetable, or if you're a human, or if you're a USB speaker, right? You cannot be an apple if you're any of those things. If you are an apple, it is necessarily true that you are a fruit. So that's necessity. We could say A is necessary for B, where B cannot be the case unless A is the case, right? So you can't be an apple unless you're a fruit, right? So it's necessary. But notice that being a fruit is not sufficient for being an apple. If I'm a fruit, I could be a banana or a grapefruit. I might be any number of things. So being a fruit is necessary for being an apple, but it's not sufficient. You know, being a vegetable is necessary for being broccoli, but it's not sufficient. I could just as easily be cauliflower or a cucumber or a pickle, right? I guess pickles are cucumbers, aren't they? Yeah, it can be anything. It can be any number of things. That's why we need sufficiency. So how does sufficiency work? I like to explain it with this example. Knowing that Elizabeth II is Queen of the United Kingdom is sufficient to conclude that she is a woman, right? It's adequate grounds for me to conclude, to make a conclusion about her gender, knowing that she's the queen, right? So it's sufficient. It's adequate grounds is kind of like how I like to think of it. And this is how we thought of concepts, the classical view of concepts in analytic philosophy. If we try to define something, what we have to do is come up with its necessary and sufficient conditions. What are the necessary and sufficient conditions for a thing to be what it is, right? What are the necessary and sufficient conditions for being a cup? Well, it's got to hold liquid. I guess I have to be able to drink out of it. So I guess a necessary condition would be to be solid and to be shaped as a vessel is another one. To have a space at the top where you could drink, right? You see where I'm going with this. We can define a cup like this, right? But can we? Wittgenstein didn't think so. Wittgenstein didn't think the classical view of concepts was actually the right way to do it. He thought that really how we understand things is more about what he called family resemblance. So there are cluster categories or cluster concepts rather than these classically defined concepts defined in terms of necessary and sufficient conditions. And the example that Wittgenstein uses is games. I need a game, any game. Name a game. It can be a sport, board game, any game. Chess, Risk. Excellent. That's two perfect examples. Solitaire, rock, paper, scissors. Exactly. Monopoly. Sorry. Yeah, these are all games. And look, hockey. Yeah, look how different all of these games are from one another. Caroms. I've never heard of that game. I'm going to have to look up what that is. Conway, Game of Life. Yeah, Game of Life is good. Oh, it's a type of board game. I like board games. You know, a really cool board game is Othello. It's big in Japan. I've only played it once. Warhammer. Yeah, look at all these different games. You've got, so far here, we've got board games, card games, sports games, role-playing games, probably some video games. Ludo, okay. Yu-Gi-Oh! Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Othello, it is like Go. It's but much smaller playing space. Yeah. And Go is something that I'd really like to try. Throw MTG. I don't know this one. What's MTG? Oh, Magic the Gathering. Right. That's another one that I haven't really. For such a nerdy fella, it's kind of weird that I haven't played Magic. Chess is what I'm into right now. I'm like super into chess right now. I'm not good at it, but it's fun. But look at all these different games: card games, sports games, board games, video games, role-playing games. Yeah, see, maybe Jonah, like that's what I hear. Go is more complicated by far, by far. And that's kind of why I want to give it a shot, right? Even though I'm bad at chess. I did win my first and only Othello game. I easily won. So maybe I'll be good at Go. I don't know. But all these different games, yeah, it's underrated, you say. Yeah, Stephen. I guess I could get like an app, like a Go app. You know, like I play chess on my phone. I could play Go on my phone. Learn to play it that way. Anyway, so games. Do you think, you know, looking at all of these different examples that you've all come up with? I mean, look, I've heard about like I've just heard of like 3 or 4 games that I've never even heard of. How would we come up with the necessary and sufficient conditions to define game? I mean, we can't, can we? We can't. Look at all the different kinds of games. I mean, is it the number of players? No. Board games can have 2, 4, 6 players. Same with card games. In different sports, some are individual, some are group, some are played on a board. Well, Holden says, you know, it involves a set of rules and some sort of objective. Yeah. But yeah, as Zach says, not always. Not always. Max, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that like all games, like, yeah, they may have players or rules or an objective, but I think like the most important thing is that everyone participating in the game like realizes that it's a game. Like it has there's like a separation between like this is like normal life and this is like what we're doing like in normal society, but then now we're like entering the game.
Yeah.
Of course, certain people can be pranked, but you know, I think there's some element of like agreed upon, not necessarily consent, but like an understanding
you know,
of a different mode.
I mean, this is sounding a lot like Squid Game.
If you never play League of Legends, do not assume. Okay, like I uninstalled it, but
I haven't played League of Legends myself. But yeah, there's a good point. In that there's a sort of pretense, right? Geez, maybe I'll have to try League of Legends. I don't really know much about the game. I saw the show. Don't. Why? Is it bad or is it addictive? It's frustrating. Oh, I see. Okay. Maybe I won't then. Always blame the jungler. But so games like, yeah, maybe we can say like, okay, there is a sort of like, as Max is saying, there's a sort of a pretend this is not real, it's a game. But beyond that, it's hard to say what characterizes a game in terms of necessity and sufficiency. Wittgenstein rather argued that what makes a game is its family resemblance to other games. Games form a family, a sort of cluster concept. You know, some games are more similar to others and different from yet others, right? But they all form a kind of family. And a lot of present day philosophers of technology actually take a view that's quite similar to Wittgenstein's. Dusek explains as follows. He says, current philosophers of technology, such as Donna Haraway, well, I hope we get to read some of her stuff later, Andrew Feenberg, and others, have ceased searching for an essence of technology of the sort propounded by early or mid 20th century thinkers such as Martin Heidegger or Jacques Ellul. So if we do encounter Heidegger, you're going to see he's like all about this. And Heidegger's a weird dude. Like, you know, first of all, a giant Nazi. So, you know, just everybody needs to know that. We are going to talk about Heidegger a little bit, but you need to know that he was involved with the Nazi Party. So that's not good. Jacques Ellul, I'm a little bit less familiar with, but I'm really keen on getting more into that and more into his work. So I'm looking forward to that. AC, sorry to go back a bit. What is an example of a game that doesn't require rules and an objective? I can't seem to think of one. Well, that's, I mean, a lot of people in the chat, Conway Game of Life doesn't have an objective. Oh, I misread what you said. Julian. You're not talking about the Game of Life like the board game. Okay, the Game of Life from John Conway, the computer scientist. Yeah, that's what you mean, right? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I misunderstood. Yeah. So, yeah, it's cellular. Yeah, we still call it I mean, it could be. It could be in that it's not real, right? It's you know, like the earlier point, it's not life itself. It's a sort of a pretend simulation with no players, as Thomas says here. So, I mean, oh, what's that? Jonas shared 0-player game. Oh, like Thomas said. I mean, let's see what it says. Thousand white blank cards. Okay. So a 0-player game is anything that can evolve purely according to chance. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah, so in that sense, like it says here, in that way, the Game of Life would be an example of that. That's interesting. Okay, that's pretty cool. Another thing, I mean, I think to myself of how many times I've sat down to play Cards Against Humanity, and it just devolves into, you know, just random nonsense. We forget about playing the game properly. So, okay, how are we doing for time? Oh, we're almost done. Max, go ahead.
Okay, wait, I just have a quick example of like, I don't know if it's like a game without rules or objective, but like, do you know when you play games as a child, like you remind me of this with when you playing Cards Against Humanity, but you know when you're playing games as a child, like, I don't know, Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or whatever, and none of your friends like actually know the rules and none of you are actually playing for the objective of the game of what it was designed for, yet regardless, like you're still using the tool, like the technology, but
Yeah.
the rules system is like given, but there's not really like no rules or objective. It's just like not what it's intended. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, I think I know a guy who actually plays chess that way. He doesn't know the rules. He just moves random pieces wherever the computer screen will let him. He's not very good at chess. So, yeah. So he's an interesting fellow. But I mean, I guess, you know, even if you want to say like, oh, there have to be players. Well, there are 0-player games. There do have to be rules. Rules are necessary for a game, but are they sufficient? Probably not, because rules are also at play in so many other social situations. So rules may be necessary and sufficient for like social interactions of many different kinds. But, you know, are they sufficient for games? No. If I'm driving and following the traffic rules, I'm not playing a game, right? But if I'm playing GTA and I'm driving around breaking all the traffic rules, then I am playing a game. So, you know, That's what my girlfriend likes to do. She likes to steal an ambulance and then run people over with it. She says she likes the irony of it. So yeah, that's fun. So the summary here is that a lot of philosophers of technology from the first big chunk of the 20th century believed that we could define technology, according to some essential nature. But now most thinkers actually don't think that we can do this. They don't take the sort of approach that like Heidegger and Ellul do. Rather, they are much more like Wittgenstein in their approach. They don't think that there's a single defining essential characteristic shared by all of the things that we call technology. Rather, technology might be more like a cluster concept. And sure, we can use our precising or pricing definition to try and make this concept a little more precise, but it's always going to be a little bit fuzzy. So, but that's okay. We can still learn something. As Dusek says in the beginning of this chapter, even if we fail to reach a consensus on how to define technology, we're still going to learn a lot about what it is. So that's okay. Maybe we have time to do one more slide. Yeah. Maybe I'll save this for next time because this is kind of a discussion slide. So this is where we'll pick up next time. And I think what I'll do is just start the next set of slides here and continue on. This set of slides doesn't go quite to the end of the chapter. So I'll upload another set of slides that will start from here and go all the way to the end of the chapter. I suppose that's all. I guess everybody wants to get to work on their stuff, right? Everybody wants to go and write their critical responses. So I will end it here. And remember everybody, like if you have any questions, let me know. Email is good for longer messages. Discord is good if you've got like a kind of a quick concern and you want to get a hold of me. I tend to, I've always kind of got my phone on me and I've got my Discord app open. So what is the scope of our response up until this slide 1 and 2 in the book? Yeah, I mean, don't feel like you have to talk about everything in that space, but yeah, I encourage people to pick from what we've covered up until the responses due, or at least up until maybe like a few days before the response is due, so you have time to work on it. But that's what I recommend doing. You can go ahead if you want, like go further ahead into the book, but I would recommend exercising caution if you do that, because I haven't lectured on it yet. But if you really want to, you can do it, but you're taking a bit of a risk. But yeah, you can pick any idea up until, anything we've covered so far is fair game. Could be something from the textbook, chapters 1 or 2, or from my lectures that's not in the textbook, or it can even be something from outside of class that you relate to what I've discussed in lecture or what the textbook discusses, right? So, yeah, no problem. Well, if that's all, another quick question. Will this lecture be, oh yeah, well, hopefully right away. It always takes me an hour or 2 to upload it. And the last lecture took forever. And I think that was a problem on YouTube's end. So, but I will be uploading this within the next little while. So thank you, everybody. And I will see you all next time for our next class. And if there are any questions in the meantime, please do get in touch and let me know. Okay, so take care, everyone, and bye for now.